See, there we go. Because Piero would kill me if I forgot to record it. So there we go. All right. So Victoria, do you want to bring up your slides and then I'll introduce you, or how do you want to do it?
Let's do that. Are you starting already?
Yeah, we'll start by the time you bring up your slides and stuff.
Okay, that's perfect to have the
Okay,
slides
yeah.
up. Okay, so that way I don't fumble with it. Okay, so let's do this full
There we
screen,
go. Perfect.
and we're all set. Okay.
Excellent. All right. So for those of you who are coming in to listen to the lectures, you can put your questions or comments into the Q&A. And after each talk, we'll go through the questions and answer all of them. Okay. So please feel free to do that. Our first speaker is Victoria Vesna, who's an artist and professor at UCLA, Department of Design, Media Arts, and director of the Art Sci Center at the School of the Arts and Architecture and the California Nanosystems Institute. Victoria's work is focused on environmental issues and involves long-term collaborations with composers, nanoscientists, neuroscientists, evolutionary biologists, and she brings all of that to her own work and to her students. Okay, Victoria, go for it.
Thank you, Tammy. It's so great to see you. And as I was thinking about doing this talk, I was trying to remember how long ago we known each other. So before you started recording, it's about 20 years. I'm going to talk a little bit about the process and the connectivity of different things that I'm involved in. So it's a little bit of a different type of talk. And starting with mentioning Piero Scaruffi, who is not with us. He's somewhere in China en route, probably. But I want to just honor him for a second because he actually came up with this idea to have Leonardo Art Science Evening Rendezvous. And it was meant as a very kind of collegial, easy way for people to just get together. And his idea was something that I very much share, that the core of collaborations and the core of people coming together from different disciplines is really just hanging out together. If you enjoy each other as people, then you're willing to make the effort to spend more time outside of work, to cross over a lot of disciplinary language, which a lot of time is the problem. And to his credit, from that small idea, now I think there's about 50 different locations around the world. So I pulled up the map just a bit, but I don't think it's really updated. And then I want to say a little shout out to our host today, Tammy, who actually our paths crossed, but here in this book, I think I really started appreciating her work. And she's an example of a lot of friends who are scientists who cross over in their thinking about complexity, about the environment, about our human condition, and go into the molecular scale and biological, obviously. But this book is something that crossed over for both of us. James Jimczewski, my partner, who's a nanoscientist, was also part of it. And a bit of a hats off to Peter Weibel, who passed away recently, who also just left such a legacy for art and science collaborations, and the ZET Camp, of course. And so just last week, I tuned in literally to a laser that was co-hosted by Satinder Gill and Chrissy Manu. Satinder is at Cambridge, and she's a good friend also. She is now one of the main editors of AI and Society, and I've served as a North American editor for that journal for many years. So she invited me, and I just came in because of the topic, which very much is of interest to me. And then for the first time, I got to talk to Chrissy, who have crossed over paths in the past, but this time we actually got to talk, and I got very interested. And it turns out that we were in the same part of the world, both on the East Coast at the moment. So we decided to meet. During this laser, I also was introduced to the work of Stephanie Loveless, and her work is quite amazing and very important to my personal research over the years, and currently trying to pull it all together. Stephanie now is the director of Deep Listening Institute at RPI, which most of you actually know. Pauline Oliveras started this institute and started really having artists, sound artists in particular, listen in a deeper way, very much related to Buddhistic practice. This is just a couple of things that I grabbed literally from the Zoom call when we were listening to her talk, and I love these ideas. So I reached out to Chrissy and Stephanie and met with them yesterday. So we actually had laser connect us, and I wanted to make a point of that in this context. While we were sitting in the coffee shop, so Chrissy, Stephanie, and myself, she mentioned, oh yeah, so you're contributing to a chapter in a book that I'm co-editing with Morten Sordengard. Wait, really? So I just connected to Morten through Anna Naher, and I didn't quite understand that she was part of it, but I was excited about it. The book is called Situated Listening, and she very much reminded me that we owed her an abstract. So I was a little taken aback, but also very excited to see how all of these things were interconnecting beautifully. Now, Morten, I know through a work that was pretty much premiering when I was in, working with Jim, who I mentioned earlier, on Blue Morph. This was based on a Blue Morpho butterfly. And what we did in Jim's lab is actually measure the metamorphosis of a chrysalis into a butterfly. And so we maybe have time, but I would just skip through. I just wanted to show that the metamorphosis happened over a course of 2 weeks, and it happens in bursts. And what we did over a course of time is develop a whole installation around it to have people listen to sounds of metamorphosis that normally obviously are not heard. So here's an image that utilized some of the scanning microscopy of the cells of the butterfly's wings, and the person who was in the installation looked like this. These are two different versions. What you see in this one is at the Saint John the Divine Cathedral. That was I can't remember exactly when, but it was probably the most magnificent version of it, where it really, the sounds of metamorphosis enveloped the entire cathedral. And then we did smaller versions, but basically it's really putting you in a deep state where you are listening to these organic sounds that have been sped up and amplified. One of the things that Stephanie brought up during the coffee shop conversation is, so why do we need proof? Because Chrissy was saying that she really loves the idea of EEGs and to see the EEGs and how these things connect. And then we brought up a work I did a few years ago in collaboration with Mark Cohen, who's a neuroscientist at UCLA, where we had two people wearing octopus crowns, non-verbally communicating and connecting to another species, and another intelligent species, I should add. There's 8 sounds, and they were connected to 8 colors. And depending on which waves were being connected, alpha, beta, theta, the colors would change in real time. Now, what you're seeing here And why I wanted to bring it up, I'll just do it without sound, is what you're saying here is the monitor. And so this actually was very interesting to me because at one point I felt we don't need proof. We can see when people really connect and they vibe with each other. But for the scientists, he really felt strongly, no, we should do this. And then I realized that by working with an artist, I actually created an opportunity for him to do research that actually would not be possible in a lab where you get isolated. And it's a very much a reductionist method. And oddly enough, it really meant a lot to the audience. So they somehow also felt like they needed proof. And so I think there's a lot to be said about that, and a lot to be said about playing around with, obviously, this these two people wearing octopus crowns is not exactly, science, but it's embedded in scientific research. And I think this is where that really kind of edge has to be found when you're working with art and science. So that all brings us to a project that I'm working on now, now in the third year. It's part of the Getty Pacific Standard Time, which happens every 4 years. Some of you may be aware of it. I am together with Anuradha Vikram curating an exhibition called Atmosphere of Sound, Sonic Arts in Times of Climate Disruption. This came up because in the book that Stephanie is co-editing with Martin, I am supposed to, we all contributors are supposed to collaborate with another writer. And so I chose, actually the other way around, Anna invited me, Anna Naher, to write a piece with her. Now going back in time again to show how these connections work, when I showed the blue morph years ago in Poland, Anna was invited to translate the text into Polish. 10 years passed, we didn't know each other. Her name was just a name to me in the catalog. And she then resurfaced when I was doing Noise Aquarium during the pandemic. And we suddenly made these connections and we started working online for about almost 3 years, the entire pandemic. We were online working together. And then we met about 3 months ago, which was really spectacular. She is one of the artists in Atmosphere of Sound, Sonic Art in Times of Climate Disruption, which you can find online. There's an amazing group of artists. Here we see a photograph of Bill Fontana's work. He's actually been developing throughout the pandemic a work from the bells of the Notre Dame. Beautiful work. You can find out more online about it. And then we go to the Alien Stardust and working online and how, again, these connections happen all over the place. So in this image, what you're seeing is a group of us. So I was just mentioning, Anna Naher is here. Rhiannon Catalyst and Paul Geluso are in New York, and they were, she was singing from New York. He was doing real-time engineering. John was doing real-time engineering in LA, and also gathering data, COVID data, that was in real time being brought in to the audience. We started experimenting with doing meditations that I called wide open eyes meditations with sound and working with binaural sound. So we had Ivana and Ellie, Deborah, Zainab, Clinton, students also involved, and they were fantastic, and it just was such a great community. We did a number of these meditations, including in a laser. And so bringing it back to from dust to noise pollution, this piece is what connected Anna Naher and myself, because we both were very much working with sound and environmental issues. This is an image from Ars Electronica, where I blew up these planktons that were visualized at the Angewandte scientific lab. And Martina Froschel did these beautiful animations based on actual 3D scans. But my big question was, how does noise pollution, underwater noise pollution, impact these microorganisms? Which of course cannot be really answered, because the traditional research methods are one animal at a time or a few, but plankton are small and there's thousands of species and they're hard to track. But there's some evidence now more and more that in fact it does affect the whole system. And we also tapped into microplastics and how all of that connects. So the sound is really meant to wake people up, and this is when it's very noisy. And this is when it's really noisy. So when you hear fracking or sonar or different sounds that happen underwater. So a lot of times what I'm interested in is sound that we don't hear at all, that gets amplified, like in the metamorphosis of the butterfly. But then there's sound that's hidden from us. So we don't know everything that's happening under the oceans. And it's really actually quite horrendous. Raising awareness of this is key. And then to speak just a little bit back to the topic in the last few minutes, this is a class that I've been teaching for the last 5 years. And I teach it at UCLA, but I also teach it at University of Linz in the Interface Cultures programs. And it's called Vibrations Matter. It's really looking into some of these issues that I was talking about. This is just one snapshot of it. Students and friends, all of us create this database of all these different inspirations from vibrations and frequencies in particular. And it's actually spawned an interest for us to create a lab. So we're actually creating a vibration frequency lab in the basement of the chemistry building. I'm super excited about that. We got a bunch of analog devices we collected from physics and chemistry that they're throwing away, and we're going to play with that. And that's coming together really nicely also with the Getty project, of course. So I'll just end with a really nice example of art science collaborations in relation to frequencies and vibrations. So this is Carlo, who is from the University of Bologna, and he researches cardio cells, and he looks at how the vibrations, how you can actually detect minute frequencies and vibrations and discover issues in the heart. And the person he worked with was a sound artist, and together they just made such an amazing collaborations. So to end, I'll just say that I'm super interested to hear from anybody who's curious about what is it that we don't hear in relation to molecular, cellular vibrations, to brain waves, to space, humans, animals, environment, the weather, things that we don't normally hear, and how that could be helpful to us to listen to each other. Because listening is really important, and deep listening is a skill that we all should be working on. So with that, I'll thank you and pass it back on to Tammy. You're muted, Tammy. You're muted. You're muted.
Okay. Can you hear me
There you
now?
are. You're back.
Oh, you didn't hear me that whole time? I unmuted myself. That's weird. Okay. I guess you were hosting. All right. So does anybody have questions in the Q&A who'd like to direct a question to Victoria? Okay, I have a few questions for you.
Okay.
If nobody else has one in the chat. Okay. So my first question is, so I know there's a lot of work on how sound in the ocean has affected like the whales and stuff like that, especially coming off of boats, I guess, that have like sonar. And I was wondering if there's a way that you track or look at, or somebody has done, like the effect on large and small creatures in the sea.
You know, well, first of all, one of the artists who is in the Atmosphere of Sound exhibition is Yolanda Harris, who is at UC Santa Cruz. And she has collaborated with marine biologist, whose name escapes me now, who actually puts cameras and recording devices on whales and then follows them. And she actually used some of this footage of the whales moving through space, which is pretty incredible. There's a lot of research with dolphins and whales, and we actually know very much that it's having a horrible impact on them, in addition to the pollution. So everything is about fossil fuels in the end, the way, however you turn it. As far as the microorganisms go, it's a very, like I mentioned, it's a very difficult one to track. So scientists, I did locate a few papers, and scientists are noticing that there's certain areas where there's less plankton, and they're theorizing that it's probably because of not only noise, but other pollution. So it's all interrelated. I mean, that was kind of my point here. We're socially interrelated, but then our whole network of ecological network, you can't really separate things so much. Case in point is when we arrived from California to upstate New York, we had to stay shut for 2 days because of the smoke that's coming from Canada. So it really, the sense of separation is really the whole problem. And part of the traditional scientific methodology is to kind of separate things. So like you saw with the octopus brainstorming, there's no way Mark could have done that in a lab and gotten funding for it. So it's really about how do we open this up? And these collaborations actually provide that opportunity. But with planktons, it's really quite urgent because they're at the bottom of the food chain. And a lot of planktons actually by mistake eat microplastics and die. So it's not only noise, it could be just even the plastic particles. It's quite dire in many ways. And because we don't see it, we don't hear it, you know, submarines and fracking and sonar and you name it.
There's so many things. Yeah. Somebody, a colleague of mine studies in Antarctica, the plankton columns and the effect of the ozone hole on them. Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Another ironic thing is that Noise Aquarium was in a show that was really a fantastic show. It's called Our Time on Earth at the Barbican in London, and I wasn't able to go there because of the pandemic. Now it's moved, it's a traveling show, and it's moved to all places, Quebec. So this is where all the fire, and I was thinking, oh, I'll be in New York. I can easily just go over to Quebec, and no, this is the epicenter of those fires. So it's ironic and kind of sad. You know, it almost feels like are we messengers a little bit too late? Or are we just
Sure.
showing our experiences, because
Mhm.
things are just getting worse, not better. But we do have our community and our network, and that's why I wanted to make a point of that.
There's one question that in the Q&A from Jane Alexander. It says, how does this fit with the vibrations from tinnitus, which can sound like listening to a seashell?
Mhm. There's been a lot of research about tinnitus, and I don't have an answer for you, but I think it's something that's definitely worth researching deeper, because the answers that are out there are not very clear. It could be related to heart, to blood pressure, to stress. There's so many different things that can make tinnitus happen. Never sure how to pronounce that. Do you know anything about it?
Me? No, I know nothing about it at all. I'll just ask you one, I guess, quickie question. If you could kind of say, I think I know the answer to this, but maybe for everybody else listening and watching, what links your work from work to work to work together? What is the underlying?
Yeah. No, it's actually a pretty straightforward answer. I'm very interested in scale and the interconnectivity, and then the invisible and inaudible realms. Those three things just keep popping up in my work, and I can't stop being fascinated by what we don't see or we don't hear. And then taking a speck of dust and making it huge just makes me really happy. And I hope it makes others happy too.
Thank you. Anybody else have a question for Victoria before we switch over?
Now let's switch over.
That's good. Let's switch over. Thank you.
Thank you, Tammy.
Okay, bye.